Hey everybody, welcome to another midweek discussion where Pastor Mario and I talk about past Sunday's message, talk about the readings that we're doing this week to continue to keep these ideas in front of us and learn and pursue this and grow in this. So this past Sunday, we kind of wrapped up the final three thoughts in 2 Peter, we wrapped up the final three thoughts in 2 Peter 1, 5 through 7. And so it's all been building on this idea of make every effort to supplement your faith with. And so we looked at godliness. What does that really mean? Where does that flow from? Place of reverence. Brotherly affection, phileo love, and love, agape love.
Yeah.
So before we dive into Ezekiel 20, John 17, Revelation 4 and 5, any thoughts, anything stick out from the sermon, any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I thought, anytime you talk about sanctification, it's just a great sermon. But there was something that I think you did give like a biblical definition of godliness that I think is super helpful. And literally you said godliness is a proper heart response to the truth of God's character. So when I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, okay, like godliness is not like me trying to attain God's character by my own self or by my own works. It's my heart response to who he is. And in that, he makes me holy. He makes me.
And that is not my definition.
godly.
That is not.
No, I said a biblical
Yeah.
definition. Yeah,
That's like, I'm not smart enough to word that like that. Yeah, I got that from a couple different studies compiling it.
Okay.
Who is it? There's one, let me look up a note while you're talking about, but when you talk about that, it's not me trying to do this on my own. It's I'm submitting to God, and in that, he equips me and he leads me in this.
Well, the reason why it was so important, I think that was good that you started there. Well, obviously because the text started there, but secondly, when you went on to talk about pursuing perfection, I think a lot of people can hear pursuing perfection and think, oh, is this like a works-based thing?
Yeah.
Like, am I just like consistently striving to try to attain something I will never attain? Because we won't ever attain it in our own strength.
Yep.
Or just white knuckling. But starting with, okay, the proper heart, godliness is the proper heart response to the truth of God's character, is like you are to pursue holiness in that truth.
So I found what I was looking for. I've got in my notes app on my phone, I like keep quotes that I love and thoughts and teachings. And Francis Chan, speaking on this passage in 2 Peter, he says, it's significant that after insisting that God has given us everything we need, and that was, we looked at that 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago now, like he has granted to us all things pertaining to life and godliness. So Chan says it's significant that after insisting that God has given us everything we need, Peter's next sentence challenges us to make every effort. Being empowered by God does not mean that we sit passively by while our circumstances miraculously change. Rather, it means that God empowers us so that we can get to work. And this is what I love, what he says here. It means that as we get to work, God will be working through us to make our feeble efforts effective. And I love that, like as we get to work, God is working through us to make our feeble efforts effective. And it's just this incredible.
That is a wonderful definition.
Loved that. So
that's good.
That I was a fan of.
So I just thought that was super helpful because it is the youth we're about to go through the book of James, and James he's famous for saying like, faith without works is dead. And so it's like, all right, is it just works or is it just faith? It's like, no, it's out of your faith will come works. And that's what it's getting at.
This isn't original to me. This probably honestly isn't even original to the first speaker I heard say this. I think it's probably one of those sayings that has been in church history for so long that nobody really knows who first said it. But I think it's really summarized well where, speaking of James, speaking of this idea of godliness, right, like a proper heart response, we are not saved by works. We are saved for works. And that's a 3-second.
Which went on to, and then you talk about holiness set apart, and then from corruption to Christ, which I think, that literally saved for works.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So yeah, I thought it was very helpful.
Yeah.
All that to say?
It was, I really enjoyed that one, especially looking at reverence, how godliness, the second half of that definition is, so it's a proper heart response to the person of God, the character of God, the promises of God, the nature of God, that visibly shows itself in our reverence. And I think that second half is so crucial. One of the phrases that I've used over the last couple years, especially when I was interviewing with churches, when I was interviewing with a bunch of different churches before it was clear that God was calling us here. And, when you're interviewing for a lead position, everybody wants to talk about what's your church philosophy? What is your, how are you going to approach leading a church? And one of the phrases I used over and over again was, when I look at a lot of the modern American church, I think we have sacrificed reverence in the name of relevance. And I was like, I'm pretty staunchly going to emphasize reverence over relevance.
Yeah.
Like if we've got to toss one of the two of those out the window, relevance is gone. You know what I mean? So we might not be like up to date with the latest social zeitgeist about what is morally acceptable, because we will not sacrifice the reverence of God as his church. And so I really love in the different studies that I was diving into that there was that emphasis on you can't separate godliness from reverence. Because I think that provides us with that very helpful framework of, okay, if I don't see the end result, if I don't see an increase of endurance or faithfulness, or, if I'm missing that in my life, let's work backwards. Oh, is that starting gate of reverence missing? If you think of a sprinter, and I ran track for a couple of years, and we had one of our coaches, one of our sprinting coaches, just drilled. All we would do for half of practice was just work on the starting blocks. And where do we position the starting blocks? How do we come out of the starting block? Because he was like, if you mess up the starting blocks, the rest of your race is in big trouble. And so with that analogy, I kind of think of reverence as the starting blocks. You know what I mean? Like if I've messed up my reverence, if I've neglected my reverence, the rest of my race is in big trouble.
But, which makes sense, because I think you read it in the sermon, but Proverbs 1, is like the fear of the Lord. The reverence of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge.
Yeah.
It's the starting block.
It's a starting block. So I really enjoyed that. And I think when you then get into the readings, and we're not going to, as we've kind of been transitioning these videos, if you've missed a couple and you've missed us saying this, the goal of this midweek and the goal of why do we at the end of a sermon say, hey, here's what we're reading, is because we want to be, Ephesians 4, the church is supposed to be equipping the members of the church and training them how to pursue these things. And then train others, parents train kids, grandparents, aunts, uncles, train your younger family members, train a younger in faith believer. Maybe they're older than you, but they've been a Christian for shorter than you. You know what I mean? And so as we've been transitioning these videos, we've been moving away from really going all right, let's go through each of the readings and really, just kind of, it's no, you heard the sermon, you know what we talked about, you know that these chapters were picked for a reason. So you find how the two fit together and, see how the scripture supports itself. But we're still pulling out different ideas or kind of pulling up sidecar conversations. And I think what doesn't maybe appear at first glance in Ezekiel 20, but when you really slow down and look at it and look at the pattern of repetition that Israel was caught in, that we still continue in today, I think what you see is a very forgetful attitude of reverence. When you read through it, in my Bible, the section heading is literally Israel's continuing rebellion. And through Ezekiel 20, it's like, God's like, hey, don't do this. But they rebelled against God. So then I did this. But I held back. And the other thing I want to point out is that it's easy to read through Ezekiel 20 and focus on the negatives. But also read through Ezekiel 20 and notice how patient God is.
The repeated patience
and mercy and just, when God says, I'm a God slow to anger. That's Ezekiel 20.
It's a great Which, yeah, I mean, I literally, let's see. When I was going through, what was sticking out is the amount of times God says how he did something so that his name would not be profaned. I think I literally counted 7 or 8 times.
And I love that you brought that up because that's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah.
God will ultimately not allow irreverence towards his glory.
Yep.
He has given us the right to express that reverence.
Yep.
But if we neglect it, God will step in
Yeah.
and make sure his name is not profaned.
Yeah.
And so I like that to me is, I don't know, that's a really, I think, significant reminder for me of like, look, this is important to give reverence to God's name and his glory. And if we neglect it, then God will step in and take the measures necessary so that his name is not profaned. And that might mean punishment of his church, of his people. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times we're like, whoa, why are we facing these consequences? What? This is so unfair. Like and it's like, no, are we facing these consequences?
Yeah.
Because we as the church were way too close to profaning God's name. And he was like, not going to let that happen. So I'm going to step in and correct.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because ultimately, and I don't know, I think it could be a struggle for some people. But ultimately, God does everything for the sake of his name, which is good.
Good.
Like
Good
that
thing.
is the best for us.
Yep.
That is the best for the world. That's the best for his creation, that he puts his name above everything because everything is fueled from the truth of his name.
Yeah.
I mean, we go through the different names that he has, and a lot of those names impact how he relates to us. So I just thought it was very significant that, like, you know, in judgment and in grace and mercy and patience, both keep God's name from being profaned. Both of his acts of judgment and his acts of patience and mercy and grace.
Oh, that's a great, that's such a great point.
So yeah.
Yeah,
It was
God
good.
is never not working for the glory of his name.
Yep.
Which kind of then draws me to John 17, which was another chapter that we read, the high priestly prayer. And the detail that I really want to tease out of there that I think goes back to the sermon, you know, in the sermon I kept repeating, this is a privilege. This is an honor. This is a right. This is not a task. This is not burdensome. This is not a chore. This is, are you kidding me? I get the right to do this?
Yeah.
Why do we use that word so strongly? Because in John 17, we see that God has no need for us. Like,
Expound on that, Sam.
what I love in John 17 is how often God or Jesus points out, like verse 5, glorify me in your own presence with the glory that I had with you before the world existed. Verse 26, I will continue to make it known that the love with which you have loved me. Verse 24, to see my glory that you have given me because you loved me before the foundation of the world. Like, I love Jesus's emphasis in this that, like, you think I didn't have glory until humans came along? You think I wasn't loved until humans came along?
Or glory until I was resurrected?
Right, like God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, the triune Godhead has no need of us. They were existing in perfect glory and love well before the world existed.
Now, why is that a good thing? Because I think some people could hear that and be like, oh, God doesn't care about me because...
He doesn't need me.
Exactly. So...
No, that's the wrong perspective. It's a great thing because he doesn't need me, and yet he invites me into this fellowship.
Yep.
He invites me into this love. He invites me into, hey, I don't need you, Community Bible Church, but because I love you, I'm going to give you the right and the honor and the privilege and the opportunity to glorify my name. I don't need you to glorify my name. It'd be like if, I don't know, the Olympics, you know, the Olympics, right? And if they were like, hey, Sam, like okay, let's go to the dream team, the original dream team, 92 Olympics, U.S. basketball's in shambles. And so they assemble the dream team. They're dominating, they're steamrolling, and they're like, hey, Sam, here's a uniform, right? and you get to stand on the medal podium with, like, you get to stand on the gold medal podium with us.
Yeah.
Man, Michael Jordan doesn't need me. Charles Barkley doesn't need me. Like, you think
But
those
it's an
guys
honor to stand with them,
need me? Because that's even but that's literally like Larry Bird has no need for Sam to help him with his shot, right? But if those guys are like, no, hey, you're invited to stand with us and to get this gold medal and to stand at that top podium. So when I read John 17 and I'm reminded that God doesn't need me, it reminds me of what we talked about Sunday, that the opportunity to do this is such an honor.
Yeah. And I think that's what really fuels, like, it brings it back to reverence, honestly. Because once we realize, like, okay, God doesn't, and this is what we actually talked about during our time at MCS, was, okay, God doesn't need us, but he wants us.
Yeah.
And that's a huge difference.
And
in his
you
heart.
talk about reverence, I think it also fuels humility. To continue with this dream team analogy, right?
Yep.
If I were invited to be on that team roster and to wear a uniform, I'm not walking into the locker room at halftime like, okay, listen up, I got some advice to impart to
I did
you
it.
all.
I won this medal.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm there just like, I'm just grateful to be here, man.
Yeah.
You're in charge, I'm gonna listen to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's that idea of reverence and humility of, wow, the triune God does not need me for their glory and honor and love. So I'm gonna listen to you and I'm gonna do what you say.
That's really good. That's good. What do you think about Revelation 4 and 5, or 5 and 6? Or was it 4 and 5?
Revelation 4 and 5.
Oh, it was 4 and 5.
Revelation 4 and 5. I mean, that's just the glory and the glory and the worthiness of Jesus. That's just, if you can't read those two chapters and not come away with a profound impression of the reverence that we should have.
Yep. I think a key verse for me was verse 12. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power, wealth, wisdom, might, honor, glory, and blessing. I mean, every aspect of
Just
all things.
done. Like that. I honestly have nothing to add. I picked Revelation 4 and 5 because I have absolutely zero to add to those two chapters.
Builds the reverence.
Yep.
And that could go back to, okay, how do I build reverence? How, like, I notice I don't have reverence, at least as much that I want, because I'm not seeing these things in my life. How do I get to a place of being more reverent of God? Reading more things like this.
Just that reminder.
So,
all right. Thanks so much for joining us. If you've got any thoughts, questions, we'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, we'll see you Sunday.
see you then. I found something very interesting in Ezekiel. I don't even know.
Ezekiel 20.
12.
Oh, okay.
I just thought it was very interesting. And I mean, it doesn't, I don't think it has anything to, well, kinda. I don't know. It says
Let's dive into it. I say you save this for a behind the scenes.
Hey everyone, Pastor Sam here. Thanks for joining us for another midweek Bible study video. If you didn't see the sermon that we were talking about, you can find it here. Or if you're interested in more of these midweek Bible study videos and thoughts as Pastor Mario and I break things down, you can find that here as well. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all our content. Thanks for joining us.